There was a lot of talk and debate about how Marvel Legends treated the brand new Marvel Spider-Man 2 Peter Parker Spider-Man Marvel Legends figure, and how that compared to its original release back in 2018. And when I say a lot of talk, I mean a lot of talk. And I thought because of that spark that I might as well do a companion piece to the Miles Morales Marvel Legends figure that's tied in to the Insomniac follow-up spin-off game. Did Marvel Legends do it again? Did they do all the same unethical things about the price hikes, the comparison, the reuse of plastic, the cutback on accessories? Let's find out. Upon the release of the Marvel Spider-Man 2 along with the reissue, they decided to more or less keep the pricing kind of adequate, with the reissue still being priced at $24.99 and the Marvel Spider-Man 2 Miles Morales $25.99, so a $1 price hike, but trust me, that pales in comparison to where we were at with the Peter Parker one, which was a whopping $10 more. So that made it a much more easier pill to swallow, why it was very easy to cover the cost of making this comparison video. The packaging win still goes over to the OG, because even though I appreciate the all black aesthetic of the new box and how much more compact it is to be able to store away, it's still the windowless design that over the course of time I've kind of turned a whole 180 on in being kind of against it, because you never really know if you're going to be getting the figure that you ordered in the first place. Whereas the original has the window, you can blatantly see the figure right there firsthand. You don't necessarily have too many plastic ties, you mainly just have tape that's holding it all together, so you still have great ease of access to the figure. And then overall the white aesthetic over the black and the little bits of red, it still complements the figure much better than the brand new version. So I would have to say that if you're going to be a mint and box collector, you'll probably be better off with the original, since it looks much more aesthetically pleasing in your collection. But that's not the main focal point of this comparison. It is going to be the figures once you crack them open. And to get started on this comparison, we're going to start with the OG, the original 2020 Miles Morales that was released alongside that standalone game. I want to call it a spin-off, but at the same time it's also bigger than your average DLC. More to come on a potential video essay for that game, since I've been kind of studying it recently to get prepped for Spider-Man 2, and as such, I am so thankful that Marvel Legends somehow, some way, whether the intention was to just get rid of extra stock, managed to come up with some form of reissue for this guy, because I didn't really want to pay any extra pricing in the aftermarket. So it's good to see that the opportunity is still found there. And you can see right here that in the 6-inch format, he's still a pretty decent render and iteration, because I do appreciate that the overall look of that Insomniac costume that they ported over in the Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales game from 2020 is still replicated fairly well here in the 6-inch format. And you can see that the costume is still translated fairly well. You see an awful lot of the matte black finish with the texturing detail happening alongside the torso. You see the stylistic choices with the little kind of angular, I don't want to call them kind of glossy finishes, because you see that coming through more so in some of the higher end figures like the Hot Toys or the Figure Arts or wherever it is else that this guy got interpreted in. But in Marvel Legends format, he's mostly matte finished. There's barely any kind of glossy, and the only little glossy texture you can find is on the pretty much any parts of the costume that are in red, mainly the little V-shape design here on the torso, as well as the spider symbols on the front and back, which are beautifully allocated and sculpted into the suit itself. It's actually texturized, so you can actually feel the spider symbols on the front and on the back, and they very much look aesthetically pleasing and pretty accurate, actually. There's barely any kind of compromises happening with the symbols themselves. They actually look like they took what you see in the 3D render and plastered it here on top of the suit itself. And much more importantly, look at that, Marvel Legends. I can actually feel the webbing. Unlike the brand new version of the Peter, you can actually feel the webbing, the red webbing that again matches the clash that I'm a huge fan of, with the majority of it being black with the red aesthetics. And as we kind of go up to the head sculpt, it's beautifully rendered with the lenses right there in the white. The actual lining alongside the lenses could have been a little thicker on the bottom side, but at least on the top it kind of adds just a little bit of personality to make it look like it's almost makes it look like the lenses have eyelids. But overall they're placed very nicely. There's not too many Q issues happening alongside here that I can personally kind of point out and complain about or nitpick, overall, the actual look of the suit itself is beautifully rendered. And it's funny because even though that this is technically a reissue of an existing figure, even if I had picked this up back in 2020, I would have been pleased at the $24.99 price, especially considering that this is technically part of a Build-A-Figure wave. I personally feel like I would have gotten my money's worth, even if the legs are a little bit too on the narrow, straight side. I would have added a little bit of extra musculature, but again, he's not meant to be as beefy as Peter, so that thought kind of comes back into my brain somehow, and therefore I'm able to kind of ease off the figure. Everything else, as far as the little aesthetics, like I said, the little utility belt thing kind of going on right here around the waist, that kind of has a little bit of those little cartridges. I think this is where he hides his cartridges. You can see that a little bit on the hips, the little bit of lining, and again, going back to those little stylistic choices he's got going on around the knees, the elbows, still coming through fairly well right here. And then we get over to the hands, where you even have a little bit of those little red knuckles sculpted into the figure. They're not painted on. You can actually feel the knuckles embedded onto the plastic. So that's beautiful to see that even back in 2020, they were able to retain an awful lot of the things as to why we remember some Marvel Legends being pretty badass, and we were willing to pay that price. The thought of this being a very definitive 6-inch version of the video game Miles Morales, and within the Gamerverse line, as they like to call it, is further cemented by the articulation. It's actually pretty decent. You have the head joint that's able to turn 360, as well as being able to move upwards fairly well. You can actually see that he's pretty much looking up a very decent amount. Looking down could have been just a little better, but it's still doing a pretty decent job, especially when you kind of fidget and nudge the head joint that's inside of the head mold itself towards the bottom. I don't know if this is intentional. I mean, you can tilt the head side to side, so that's also pretty cool right there. But it almost looks like at one point during the process, I could be wrong about this, but at one point they wanted to include a secondary neck joint here at the bottom where the shoulders meet, because there's kind of like a dividing line right there, but it never moves. It's just kind of baked into the plastic itself. So I wonder if there's some kind of history there, and I don't want to do too much to it because a couple of times I kind of moved it and I do see the plastic kind of parting in that lining. It's a little scary. Not going to do anything else with it. Don't want to risk it because it doesn't seem like it's a legitimate joint, but I wonder if at any point during the process of development for this figure they wanted to include that in there. If anybody has that inside scoop, let me know in the comments if there's some kind of background history behind that separation right there. And there's a reason for why I want to bring that up right now, because I'm going to be bringing it up a little later again. Then moving on to the shoulders. Even though I may have seen this already in prior molds of Marvel's Spidey figures before, you have an awful lot of jointage, if you will, happening in the shoulders, because you have the vertical rotating ball joint right here on the shoulder that allows it to move vertically 360 degrees, as well as being able to extend it to the sides almost at a 180. Kind of stops a little shy, so I don't know if that's just my figure, but stops a little shy of the 180 degree, and it pretty much just kind of stops right about right there, but it does extend towards the sides a decent amount. And then further into the torso, you can see very visibly right here, you have a butterfly joint that's able to extend slightly towards the front and towards the back. I feel like that could have allowed just a little bit more mobility, because I do remember Peter being able to flex just a little bit more generously than Miles can right here, but it still does a decent amount to allow the possibility to work well. Like I said, just a nitpick, not a major deal breaker. Then we got the biceps that's able to rotate horizontally 360 degrees, no problem. Elbow joints that are fully able to bend at the 2 points, although I guess this is as good a time as any, as you can clearly see right here via demonstration, they're a little on the tough side, even after giving it a pass with the hairdryer on full speed. And I don't want to risk breaking the figure, but once I managed to get a little bit of force, both elbows are able to fully bend all the way up, but they're just a little bit on the tough side. And it's funny because the elbows aren't the only culprit. They are able to bend at those 2 joints, but they require an extra little bit of force, and sometimes they can become just a little on the scary side, considering that, like I said, this is a 6-inch scale. Plastic is not necessarily all that, it's flexible, but at the same time, you never know exactly just how long these things have been kind of in storage over there at Marvel Legends, because like I said, this is the original 2020, the reissue, and therefore you don't know exactly what the life expectancy of these joints can necessarily be. Then we move on to the wrists that are fully able to rotate horizontally 360, as well as the hinge inside of that little rod that clips onto the wrist itself, that's able to move the wrists inwards and outwards like you see right there. And naturally, like you've seen with other Spideys, you're going to have the torso joints, the hinge right here in the middle that kind of points towards the top side right here, not towards the bottom, but nevertheless, the hinge is there that allows it to extend about that far back, crunch inwards, pretty generously actually. The only downside is that it separates the legs from the back spider symbol here, but once you flex the hinge towards the front, you can go about that far, so that's actually pretty good. And then the horizontal cut right there across the waist that allows it to fully rotate 360 degrees. Top leg joints are able to then move the leg about that far up, as you can see right there. Butt sculpt does kind of get in the way when moving it towards the back, but it is able to move the leg far back enough, about that degree right about right there. And then full extension towards the sides, just shy of the 180, but right about right there, pretty flexible. Now, not necessarily right in the middle of the thigh, but kind of closer to the top leg joint, you are able to allow the thigh swivel to rotate 360, but much like the elbows, they're a little on the tight side, so you might have to give it an extra firm pass with the hair dryer, but not as badly as the knee joints. These are probably the worst culprits of them sticking together, but I have a theory about that. I'll cover that, like I said, a little later. But the knees are able to bend more or less at the two joints, almost all the way up right there. So mobility is allowed, but for some reason, I got a unit here that has very sticky knee and elbow joints. I had to pass them almost twice, 10 minutes at a time with the hairdryer. So that was kind of crazy that had needed to happen, but I was able to give it the benefit of the doubt considering that this is a reissue. So maybe, I don't know, they weren't given the proper amount of time in the kiln, who knows. But you are able to bend them, as you can see right about right there. And then you got that typical ankle joint. Though the construction of the ankle joint is actually pretty firm and steady, it's still that version that I personally just don't like, where yeah, you are able to bend the foot downwards about that far and then upwards about that far, but no proper rotation whatsoever because of the way that it's all constructed, save for the pivoting towards the inside and then flux towards the outside like you see right there. So you get pivoting on both sides, but no proper rotation. If you want to rotate, you're going to rely on the thigh cut. Would have been nice to have gotten some kind of boot cut, but you can see right there that they probably wouldn't have been able to hide it. And it's probably one of the sacrifices that they had to make for this buck back in the day. Overall, though, it's pretty steady articulation that does an adequate job of giving him decent posability, the standard stuff that you would expect from a Spidey figure, so Miles Morales is not necessarily any different. And I guess because he's not any different, then any successors probably shouldn't be that different, right? Well, that's because you'd then be correct. This is the Marvel's Spider-Man 2 Miles Morales. Long and short of it is that I scanned these figures head to toe, left and right, trying every little bit and every little detail and any way to conceive of how to say what's different, what's been changed. And there's absolutely nothing, save for a couple of little cosmetic details, but overall, they are quite frankly the exact same figure. It's the same buck, it's the same mold, the same sculpt and detail, the same suit, same scale. Nothing has been virtually changed. You can see right here. All right, it's in the details, it's in the image. Don't really take my word for it, just look. It's the exact same mold. It's the exact same buck. And that would have made it a travesty. A downright crime. A bulgarily. A robbery. On Marvel Legends' part, should they have charged anything extra, let alone that $1? You could almost even make the argument for the dollar. Why is the dollar there? But save for inflation, which is a fairly good constructed argument, there's really not much different to warrant an extra boost in cost. Unlike Peter, where yeah, they may have cut back on the accessories, they may have cut back on the detailing as far as the web not being baked into the figure, certain points of articulation being cut back, but that's because they at least tried with a different model. Sure, it shouldn't have warranted the extra $10, but they did kind of give us a brand new buck to at least kind of go in line with the transition of going from a prior version of the suit to a new version. Seeing as that Miles is not necessarily upgrading his suit too badly with Marvel Spider-Man 2, Marvel Legends probably figured the exact same thing and thought, well, let's just put out the existing suit with a couple of little cosmetic differences and things included that will then bring it to a brand new generation or a brand new market. And therefore, there's really not a whole lot that I can speak on with the brand new version of Marvel Spider-Man 2 Miles Morales, save for maybe the texturing on the black being just a little bit on the smoother side. It just kind of has that... The best way that I can put it is when you change the cartridges in your printer and the ink has just a little bit of extra saturation because obviously you got brand new cartridges in your printer, but then after, let's say, the first 5 prints of whatever documents you're printing out, you finally get back to that standard quality you expect from even just your standard black and white documents. You're just printing out a letter and now it goes back to normal. That's pretty much how this kind of feels. It just kind of has that slight feel on the plastic quality as far as the black and the red that feels like it's, part of the, this was printed out of their new factory. But aside from that, you're really not dealing with anything that is remotely a huge departure from this original buck, save for, like I said, the red is just a little bit more on the muted side. I don't know if maybe I need to spend a little bit more time, but it definitely feels like if you were to take these figures and put them in Photoshop, the contrast slider was put down a little bit less on this guy versus this guy. You can see that the black and the red just pops a little better on this guy's suit versus this one. Aside from that, though, they're still using the same hues, the same overall color palette. It just feels like the contrast was brought up a little extra on this guy to make sure that the black was a little bit more on the bold side and the red has a slightly more saturated hue. Aside from that, it's essentially the exact same designs. I see no difference in sculpt. The texturing is still found there within the spider symbols on both the front and the back, as well as the web detailing on the top. And then you can see that we then get just a couple of little added furnishes, if you will, of that extra red. You can see right here from the side that a little bit of that, what I like to call Robin red, because it's kind of emulating a little bit of that sleeve red pattern lining that you have here on the top of the sleeve, kind of similar to that of Robin's suit from Batman and Robin. I don't know, that's the first image that popped into my head, and it looks like we have a similar thing going here on the top of the sleeve for the brand new Spider-Man 2 version, and that kind of bleeds a little bit into the top part of the knuckles for the hands. You can see that he no longer has the red knuckles, they're black, but you have a little bit of complementary red on the top part of the hands. So that was added in there, as well as just an extra splotch of red to kind of stand out a little bit better on the outer rims of the shoes and the soles of the feet. Apart from that, I really could not find anything else physically or cosmetically different with this brand new version of Marvel Spider-Man 2 Miles Morales. So I'm at a loss for words, and that's only because I'm not necessarily through any kind of shock or disbelief. I just don't really have much else to really add. And since they are the exact same figure, you guessed it, the articulation is going to be the exact same. So I'm just going to breeze on through this. The head can rotate 360, move up and down, to left to right. You still have that little dividing. It's a little bit better blended. It's a little less, I guess you could argue, a little bit more seamless. But if you look a little closer, you still have that little breakaway part at the bottom of the neck where the shoulders meet. So, since this is the reutilization of this buck, that little cut is still found there, and I still have to wonder if there was any plans to add a second neck joint there. So again, I must ask you guys again, if you guys know any information about this, let me know in the comments. But apart from that, the joints found in the arms and the shoulders are still completely identical. Move about vertically 360, extend towards the sides. Butterfly joints can still move inwards and outwards, but not as much as I would like to. Biceps, elbows, wrists. The torso hinge can still bend towards the back and towards the front. The waist can rotate 360. Legs and arms can still move about the exact same way. And similarly, the elbows and the knees were also stuck and very stiff on my Spider-Man 2 Miles Morales. And because of that, it kind of makes me wonder that it's not so much the buck itself or the way that Marvel Legends constructed it or whatever the case may be with them. I feel like this time around I might throw just a little bit of accountability, so to speak, to Big Bad Toy Store, who shipped my figures. I don't know if maybe their warehouse is a little bit too cold or the conditions were a little weird, but the fact that these two are from technically different, separated lines or what have you, because this is technically the 2020, this is the 2023 version, and yet both of them happen to have the elbows and the knees completely stuck. It makes me wonder, maybe those are the conditions of where they were stored at. So I don't know. The jury's completely still out on that, so who knows? But thankfully, both can be easily rectified with a hairdryer, and they were able to bend. It's just a really funny curiosity that both of them had the elbows and the knees completely stifled there. But just a word of caution, if you're managing to have yours shipped in, make sure to pass them with a hairdryer before you start posting them. That way you don't come at the risk of breaking them. Aside from that, though, again, the articulation is exactly identical. Not much more that I can really comment on that. Hand accessory wise, they're practically the same. You have the open hand pair, which is sculpted the exact same, minus the little cosmetic differences that I mentioned before, where you have the red knuckles on the 2020 version, and the 2023 version has black knuckles, but with an added splash of red there on the top of the hand. So it's going to be replicating that exact same design style. As you can see on the figure itself, he comes with the fisted hands, and then they come with an extra pair of the web shooting hands, which are of course designed the exact same way. And much like I commented on before, the saturated look of the red is still more prominent on the original 2020 version versus the 2023. That falls on a matter of preference. Personally, like I said, I prefer the much brighter, more saturated red hue on the original 2020 versus 2023, but at least it's consistent with itself, so it just depends on who you are and where you gravitate towards. And then there's an extra pair of what are called, I guess you could say, the Venom Strike hands. And even they themselves are not that different. Sure, you can visually see that they are a completely different color, and that speaks more so towards Insomniac's creative differences, where they decided to go for a original yellow design to the electricity that comes out of Miles' Venom Strike in the original 2020 version of the game, whereas in Spider-Man 2, it looks like he's going to be upgrading his powers. I don't know how he does it, since that's meant to be much more what was it called? Bioelectricity attack energy, whatever it was, but it's supposed to be coming out of him. So I don't know if he's able to change the color on a whim, or if it's maybe being put through some kind of filter through his suit. I don't know, but in the new game, he's going to have blue electricity. And you can see that in some of the new gameplay slices. You can see that he actually now has blue electricity coming out of him instead of yellow, so that's more so in part with Insomniac. And to stay consistent with that, Marvel Legends appropriately decided to simply just take the existing Venom Strike hands and coat them in a translucent blue plastic. Otherwise though, the sculpting, the way that they pop into the wrists inside of the holes there, and the actual flexibility of the electricity that's kind of coming out of here on the sides is still the exact same thing. Me personally, I'm kind of indifferent to the coloring here. Yellow, blue, doesn't really matter. Hell, maybe even I'll mix and match with either one of these figures. If this is my preferred Miles Morales, maybe I'll give him a yellow right hand and then a blue left hand, mix and match. Like I said, it allows options, and that's actually pretty cool. But at the same time, it kind of makes me wonder why some people thought that this was a brand new figure. I saw some comments on my review for that, the original Peter Parker 2018 version and the 2023 version, and why that extra $10 cost was not warranted. Some folks were commenting that Miles was getting a brand new mold. So far, I'm not seeing any difference. I don't know if maybe the wording was a little weird, where maybe they were specifically talking about how Miles was getting his own buck back in 2020. Even if this is technically a reissue, he was getting his brand new mold instead of using prior existing molds for Peter either way, whether it be the UK Spider-Man or Renew Your Vows Spider-Man for the Spider-Man 2 version, and then the prior, there was a lot of mix and match where Peter from the Insomniac game never got his original model, never got an original mold for his Marvel Legends. Whereas Miles, whether this is a reuse of this one, they're technically specific to the Gamerverse Insomniac version of Miles Morales. So what exactly is the difference between these two in this contained comparison, within this contained look from one to the next? Accessories are practically the same. Mold of the actual body is the same. Well, there's at least one major key difference that kind of plays a little bit into the ethics of value once again. The original 2020 version came with an unmasked Miles Morales head that you're able to swap out with. And here's the thing. Despite numerous problems with this head sculpt, from likeness to skin tone to, well, maybe not the hair. The hair is actually, I guess it's kind of fine. He could have used a little bit of an added fade here on the sides. But to me, the biggest problem is the fact that he just looks generic. Super generic as hell on this head sculpt. I'm sorry, but I just don't see at all the Insomniac Miles Morales here. I really don't. Maybe it's like a licensing thing. Maybe it's the same reason for why there's no unmasked head sculpts with either Peter or Miles in the Hot Toys fashion. I don't know. I don't understand why he just looks like a generic black dude. I'm sorry. He really just does. I'm sorry. I just don't see the Miles Morales. I don't even see any resemblance to the voice actor Najee Jeter, who very much looks like Miles Morales. They took some of his characteristics, his facial features, and put them on that model that's used in the Miles Morales game, and that to me is Miles Morales. This guy doesn't. And on top of that, like I said, the skin tone is kind of off, the facial features are off, I don't know. But here's the thing, despite all those problems, despite how inaccurate this thing really is, I'll gladly take an unmasked head sculpt for any Spidey figure, Miles Morales, Peter, Ben Reilly, I don't care. I'll gladly take this over the accessory they swapped it out with for Marvel's Spider-Man 2. It is Bodega Cat. Yep. They threw in this Bodega Cat accessory. And here's the problem. Even though it's not too badly sculpted and painted amongst the body, it's the face. Look at that thing. Insert the Michael Rappaport clip here.
Ma, there's a weird stray cat outside. It looks like grandma, the thing.
Yeah, they could have used an added something to the face. Maybe given him some eyelids. Maybe have the eyes be a little closer to each other because it looks like it's going off in different directions. I don't know. But not only is it a weirdly face-painted Bodega Cat sculpt, not only does it really lack any kind of function because it just kind of sits there. You know what I mean? Like, it just sits there off to the side. At least with the unmasked head, you can swap it out so you have some added functionality to the look of the figure. Make it look like he's posing without his mask like he has done a couple times in the game. I don't know. There's an awful lot of possibilities you can have with the unmasked head sculpt despite its inaccuracy. With the Bodega Cat here, he just sits on the side and that's really about it. And it looks like he's futzing with something, but what exactly is he kind of playing around with anyways? So the functionality is lacking there. It would have been nice if maybe Marvel Legends would have gone a little bit of the extra mile, which we know they're not going to do, but they would have maybe taken half of this and sculpted it inside of a backpack that he can wear. Now that I would have taken, because that's what he does in the game. He takes the cat, he puts it in the backpack, and that's how you have your Bodega Cat suit. That would have been sick. I actually would have dug that. But instead, he just kind of sits off to the side and doesn't really do anything. It would have been nice if maybe you could put it on a backpack and have him on his side. Maybe a third party or someone on eBay, some kind of customizer will come up with a backpack accessory in the 1/12 scale, which is 6-inch, and that way this could be tossed in there and it could wrap around the shoulders of the brand new Marvel Spider-Man 2 Miles Morales and function that way. That would be nice. But those are 2 existing problems amongst the 3 that I can find. You know what the biggest sin, the third final sin that this commits? Is that we've seen this before. We've seen this before. They reused the Goose cat accessory from the Captain Marvel Legends. So to a smaller extent, Marvel Legends does it again. And that gives another win to the original 2020 mold, because despite the accessories being the exact same as before, I'd rather take the unmasked head over the reuse of the Goose cat accessory, just because Miles had a bodega cat in his backpack, but hey, we don't have a backpack, we don't have functionality for the cat, and overall, he just looks really weird. With all that said and done, however, I'm about to throw you guys a bit of a M. Night Shyamalan twist. I still recommend the Marvel Spider-Man 2 one. I still recommend it because, frankly, despite the problems that I have with the cat accessory being swapped for the unmasked head and the little bits here and there as far as the stiffness of the elbows and whether or not that could be tossed up to Big Bad Toy Store where I ordered from, or from Marvel Legends for, again, rushing maybe some of the production and therefore sticking some of the joints. Hey, I was already kind of praising the original Armadillo build of this figure, which means that by technical default, the Marvel Spider-Man 2 is also a good figure. And so that means that I still recommend him, and he still kinda gets a pass because of that price. Should they have listed this at the $35 price tag as the brand new Peter Parker Marvel Spider-Man Marvel Legends, then yes, I would have declared a huge umbrage, and this would have been a much more rage-fueled comparison video, much like that one. But at the expense of that extra dollar that I'm willing to forgive due to inflation within the past 3 or so years, it manages to get by the skin of its teeth, but only if, with the only caveat here, if you missed out on either the reissue that was put out there not too long ago, or the original release from 2020 that was part of that Armadillo wave of this guy. If for any reason you don't have access to this guy, then pick this guy up, because you're still going to be in good hands knowing that this is a pretty decent 6-inch interpretation of the Insomniac Miles Morales. However, if you already own this guy via that Armadillo release back in 2020, or you did manage to secure a pre-order of the reissue through fan channels like Entertainment Earth or Big Bad Toy Store, you're completely fine off with that. You're better off, in my opinion, with the added head sculpt versus the cat. And hey, if you want to still apply things to value and what kind of amount of plastic you're thrown into your box, you get that added Armadillo piece. So if you were in the market of completing your Armadillo set, you get the added leg piece, so you're able to finally complete that Marvel Legends dream you've been having. But apart from that, it just really matters on those details and those caveats as to whether or not one is preferred over the other. Whether one is better than the other just solely falls on you, because quite frankly, they're the identical figure, and therefore the $1 difference, it's really a matter of perspective of where you fall on that dollar and how much it affects you. And since it's very much a subjective point of view as to whether or not you fall on the camp of the original Armadillo version versus the Marvel's Spider-Man 2 version, then I really don't feel too comfortable giving either one a rating. Just know that you're in good hands when it comes to having a decent 6-inch mold of the Insomniac Miles Morales. It's just a matter of where those differences kind of speak to you. And if either one does in fact speak to you, there's going to be affiliate links for Entertainment Earth that you can find in the description. That way you guys can pick out your own and still help out the channel in the process. Otherwise, guys, let me know in the comments, which one do you prefer? The original Armadillo Build-A-Figure Wave version from 2020 that was released alongside the game, or the brand new Marvel Spider-Man 2 reissue, revamp, remaster, whatever you want to call it, about this figure. Do you prefer the unmasked head sculpt despite its inaccuracies versus the reuse of the goose cat? That is really freaking me out. Let me know in the comments. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, thumbs it up. If not, thumbs it down. And as always, stay humble. I'll see you guys later.